Right, this week's Talking Points now with David Yates and Ralph Beckett. Here we go. The bans that were announced on Tuesday off the back of British Champions Day. Just a reprise, Frankie Dettori picked up 8 days plus 8 days. He went 1 over on Trawlerman, 1 over on Kinross, Ralph Beckett's horse. Sam James got referred for multiple offences, and David Allen picked up 8 days for going 1 over as well on Art Power. So there you are. That's the full complement. Who wants to have first go at this? Ralph, Kinross is your horse.
I was amazed that he went 1 over. Astonished. I would never have picked that if you'd asked me. Never. And, you know, my view would be that by putting a number on it, you cause more problems than you solve. And that's it in a nutshell for me.
I suspect you're in entire agreement with this. But we are where we are at now.
Well,
and
does that make it like we can all say the genie isn't going to go back in the bottle? Well,
we've been saying that since 2012,
yes,
haven't we?
The numbers are ridiculous. I've got lots of sympathy for the BHA on different issues, but not on this. I think the numbers are stupid. I've always said that as a lover of horse racing, as a punter, someone who watched horse racing every day of the year, that you see offensive use of the whip. It's much more nuanced than the numbers. We could look at Hong Kong and Japan, who seem much less much less agitated about putting a number on things.
They are now outliers, though.
They are now outliers. Well, they're also Japan is also the strongest single horse racing nation, I would have said.
Australia, this issue is boiling up. The United States, France's whip rules are
But where are the rules strictest? On a wider level, where are the rules strictest? Vincent Ho got a 5-week ban, 10-meeting ban for finishing dead heat in winning effectively, and he got a ban. You know, Japan, I can't believe their regulation is any weaker than it is in Hong Kong. And let's face it, regulation on a wider level here is lacking, you know, apart from when it comes to the whip.
We're still talking about the numbers to the virtual exclusion of everything else that's on the statute books. I'm indebted to Matt Chapman, actually, who I was talking to at Doncaster yesterday, who had said that 8 years worth of bans have been meted out since since March, he said, which is an astonishing statistic. And if we again, to go back to the start of this, the BHA, the people behind redrawing these rules, talked about this not being an issue of equine welfare, but being an issue of perception. What's this done for perception? What do Animal Rising think of 8 years worth of bans? And 4 on British Champions Day.
What I would say about British Champions Day is that if any kind of level of discretion had remained within the rules, I don't think any of those would have incurred bans.
Okay, but discretion is...
Discretion was removed at the jockey's behest.
Yes. Well, discretion in law is a difficult thing, whether we're talking about whips or anything else. But if I had drawn these things from the start, I would have wanted a central panel...
which you've got
a central panel whereby you are doing nothing else but looking at a jockey's use of the whip, and this is much more nuanced than just the ability to count to 7. It's to do with place, stride pattern, time to respond, which I know figures in quite a few of the offences. I think it's a dog's breakfast, and the fact that this isn't going to change and that we can't wind the clock back doesn't invalidate the views of people who rubbish this and say this is stupid.
Of course it doesn't. But they've got to learn to count in the short term.
Nonsense.
ITV Docuseries, which is going to air next year, and filming for which is going to start in December. They've chosen the jump season to do this, December through to the spring. Is this the right part of the game to focus on, Ralph? And what do you want to see when you're going to tune in on ITV next year as a fan, as much as a trainer and a participant? What do you want to see from a really good docuseries on racing?
first of all, I'd say that I was always astonished to how underplayed by the sport the horsepower of the series was.
The Kingsclear series.
I don't think that the sport got behind that in any shape or form, and I thought that was unfortunate. What I'd like to see, what I think most people would like to see from the docuseries is the characters. Concentrate on those who are prepared to stand up.
Put that head above the parapet.
Exactly. Be interesting. Yeah. People don't want to hear from, people don't want to see, we're thinking about, it's all about Cheltenham, that for a start, they need to get away from that.
So it's got to be character-based rather than...
Exactly, rather than the season.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah? Dave, any suggestions? Who would you put on your list?
God knows.
People you like.
I think that it's got to be... I've made this point to you
earlier in the week. But it can't just be Paul, Nicky, Willie, who's going to run in the Brown Advisory.
No, it's got to be more than that. Inevitably, if you're focusing on the smaller players with a shot at the title, that's a pretty well-worn idea in sport generally, rather than just like Willie Mullins with 500 horses and the top 6 in the betting for a certain race. I'd be interested to see how they get on, because the players at the top of the pyramid aren't always as forthcoming as the players at the bottom. One thing I found really interesting, and I know we've gone over again, but one thing I found really interesting, and it's something that I find fascinating and I'm hugely ignorant about, and that is the personality of a horse, right? I've kept dogs and cats all my life, and I know when they're quiet, and I know they have different personalities. But that is something, even for someone who's worked as a journalist for 30 years...
To get to know the horses better.
The thing about Kinross, well, he gets stroppy. Those are things that fascinate me, and if they fascinate me, why wouldn't they fascinate other people? I think that's something that they should really have a very keen eye for.
So get to know the animals better, and choose your characters wisely. We're going to be talking to Nick Attenborough, because the PJA are a big part of this, and he'll be along in a few moments' time to talk about this. Now, affordability checks. The Racehorse Owners Association have taken an unusual move this week, and they've issued a statement, Dave, saying that they want registered racehorse owners who own 100% of a horse to be exempt from any affordability checks. Now, is this just a bit of clever political posturing to add to the pressure on government, or is this trying to creating a fissure amongst racing's constituents?
I can't see how it's clever political anything. Charlie Lipton of the ROA said it's clearly bizarre that owners who spend thousands should be subject to checks if they lose more than £2,000 during 90 days, which is one of the things for affordability checks. I was astonished by this. It's built on quicksand, the belief that racehorse owners have more probity in their financial affairs than people at the base of the horse racing pyramid. There are so many reasons to oppose affordability checks, whether it's a good metric in the first place, the fact that it's going to do racing an awful lot of harm financially, the fact that it's an unjustified intrusion into our privacy. Those are just three. As a community, as a sport, as an industry, we should be fighting this together, not breaking off and saying, oh, please, miss, not me, miss, I don't have to do it. That smacks to me of the kid at school that the school hard nut was always waiting for him on the way home because he was trying to get out of things by claiming special exemption. I had to reread it when I saw it. We've had examples of owners who haven't paid for horses they've bought at the sales. We've had owners who have been their business has been shut down and ceased trading by the FSA over the last few months, and they're saying, not us, because we're on a different level to all the others.
Well, you finished on the bell, but you've given Ray...
Sorry, Ray, but... I
mean, brilliant. I mean, just 2 minutes.
Sorry, Ray.
I agree.
That's it. That's all. Right, on we go. To sadder news, to very sad news. The saddest end, really, for a horse that I think an awful lot of people had really warmed to, even though his career was so fleeting. Desert Crown, the brilliant Derby winner of last year, another Derby winner for Sir Michael Stoute. I think everyone very pleased for Richard Kingscote on the day. Rafe possibly not, because Westover again was behind him. But the idea that the horse has lost his life is one that's, I don't know, somehow harder to bear than quite often stories like this are.
Absolutely tragic, isn't it? Really tragic. You know, obviously, you know, to get him there. What did he win? He won a Nottingham Maiden, the Dante Derby. I mean, to get him there off 2 starts and to win in the way he did, it's just as a fantastic feat. You know, as a terrifically well balanced, well trained, well ridden horse, on every level. And then, you know, nothing went right seemingly from the moment he pulled up. From then on, it was just awful. Really, really sad.
And you feel for everyone concerned here, Dave, don't you? And you really felt his absence through this season as well, particularly given what happened after his comeback in the Brigadier Gerard and the fact that Hookham, the horse that had surprisingly beaten him, went on and won the King George.
Of course, it's really sad, this. I really felt for Richard Kingscote. I read his tribute. He said, I'm going to read you a bit of it. He said, I don't have the vocabulary to explain how amazing he was. I feel blessed and somewhat embarrassed that it was me who got to feel his brilliance. It's quite raw, that, and Richard Kingscote has had a tough year, but he got that opportunity at Freemason Lodge because of his ability. That's what happens in sport, and it'll be cold comfort, I'm sure, now someone sitting on a sofa and saying that the good days will return, but I'm absolutely positive that they will do in his case. He gave that horse an absolutely brilliant ride at Epsom. Lester Piggott had died the previous weekend, and he sat there. It was almost like the ghost of Lester Piggott. He was sitting there in about 4th or 5th, just on the heels of the leaders. A classic Piggott Epsom ride.
Wasn't it?
Wonderful stuff.
Desert Crown, whose life and career so brief but so bright on those 4 days when he raced, and I'm sure will be enormously missed by everybody at Freemason Lodge and those at the Newmarket Equine Hospital, where he was being looked after in his later days. It has been a bad week, David Yates, for Robert Tart, the rider. Why?
It has. This was to do with Robert Tart's absence from Wolverhampton in March, and the reason for that absence, in that he was required to take a drugs test, that he had a runner that day, a ride for Jane Chapel Hyam. He was told, I think, that the horse was a non-runner, and then didn't want to go to Wolverhampton for the test because that was his sole reason for going there, and said that he was going to Dubai and so wasn't able to make that trip. There was no evidence that it was alleged that the reason he didn't take the trip was for fear of what the test might show. It was said on his behalf that there was no evidence that he had taken any substances. Indeed, he did take I think he'd taken a hair sample afterwards that was clean. But of course, this is a strict liability offence, in that I don't know actually that it is a strict liability offence actually, but he was given 3 months for fabricating the story and not being able to. And not taking that test.
Okay.
Hadn't ridden since July. He had nearly 4 years out of the sport before returning in 2021. And this is an instance where I've got sympathy for the law and the defendant, if you like. He's clearly had issues. When he came back in 2021, he spoke about mental health problems, and I hope that he can move on and come back and learn from this, because he's a fine jockey.
Okay. Let's move on then and talk about Nick Rust, the former Chief Executive of the British Horse Racing Authority. About whom Rafe has expressed some quite strong views on this programme before, but that is by the by. On this occasion, he has put his head above the parapet, I think meaningfully, for the first time since his exit, David, calling for change in the sport in an address he gave earlier in the week, where he said really that the plans that the sport has come up with are not radical enough.
Yeah, that's pretty much to
sum it up.
The size of it. It was a speech at Reputation Matters. Nick Russ said bold change will be required to turn British racing around, as well as attracting new consumers. Racing's leaders need to push to restructure racing to make it far more efficient, so attracting and retaining owners is underpinned by much improved cost recovery rates. I think it was pretty broad brush, this, and pretty light on detail. Evidently, from what he said and the fact that he's made this sort of intervention, that one would deduct from that he feels that the plans published recently by the BHA, premierisation, etc., don't go far enough.
Is a much more radical restructure required than the one that we've gone with?
Yes, probably, but it was always going to be a trade-off. It's moved quite a long way away from the original Savile plan. I thought it was after timing of the first order from Nick. He was in charge during a spell when racing lost 500,000 racegoers. Was it more? 1 million racegoers in the 5 years that he was in charge. He's advocating basically a move to an off course, to a system that's funded by the off course. 10 race cards. More migration to the all-weather, You already did that, Nick. We already lost a load of racegoers by moving to a system that you advocated, that you're advocating now. He referred to what went on during COVID when there was no racegoers. So how that makes sense is beyond me. It's, and then the bit about, trainers, starter yards on all-weather race courses and all the rest of it. This is just old hat. There are any number of empty boxes in Lambourne and Newmarket. Why would you want to then go and set up training in a place where there's no infrastructure? You don't have any suppliers if you go and train at Chelmsford. You don't have any farriers, staff. You don't have any vets. They all have to travel in. They're all travelling in. They're all already having to travel in from a long way away. I thought it was rubbish.
But aren't you actually both arguing for a leaner fixture list? A leaner, more efficient fixture list that is better geographically targeted? That seems to me to be the core of what he's advocating, and that seems to me to be what most people senior in the NTF want as well. Is there where's the philosophical difference?
What we need is a sport that's attractive to the customer. And an off-course model isn't attractive to the customer, in my opinion. That's not going to engage people to get involved in the sport. You might look after turnover, which we don't see enough of anyway. You might look after that. You certainly look after RMG and Sky Sports Racing. You look after them. Brilliant. We're not seeing any of that either. So what I would advocate is a system that encourages people to come racing, because that's for the long term. That's what I would advocate.
All right, let's move on. Social media. The sport has employed 10 years ago we'd have called this a social media czar, wouldn't we? Wouldn't we have called him a social media czar?
I guess so. He's
an ex-policeman?
Yes, indeed. Sean Memory, who has been engaged by the NTF to advise on combating social media abuse, which is, I'm sure... this isn't a loaded...
You were about to say, I'm sure you get lots of abuse.
But I'm sure you do. And that's
every day. Of course. Every day. There's some fella who rings me every time I have a short price favourite beaten.
He actually calls you?
He actually calls me. And it's a withheld number, and a couple of my owners call on withheld numbers, which makes it complicated. But he'll ring up and And I had at least two calls from withheld numbers after Kinross got beat last week. At least. So that's him. This is constant all the time. And we get emails. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. I'm sure there's dozens of us. There was one, and this really got me. Actually, I trained a horse for King Power last year who broke a foreleg going around the loop at Salisbury. James Doyle fell off and broke his wrist. Do you remember? And he was out for about 3 weeks later. And I can't remember the name of the horse, and I'm sorry about it. Let's say it was called Fox Power. About 3 weeks later, this fella rings me up and he goes, "Can I speak to Fox Power, please?" What sort of person does that? So this is a good thing, and if it gets sorted out, so much the better.
I think that I'll try and make 2 points very brief. If you are getting phone calls and they are, I had a time a few years ago when I had 3 people ringing me from withheld number calls, went to the police station, actually put it in the paper, thanking them for their calls. And the old Bill said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm a journalist." They said, "Well, any chance you can get it in the paper?" I said, "Yeah, every chance." Put it in on a Saturday, and they stopped. But of course, and I'm sure you know this, Rafe, but the fact that they're withheld, if they are of a sufficient threat and of sufficient seriousness, it's the right thing to do to inform the police and say, "I'm getting regular calls from this. They can trace the person." The other thing is with unfortunately, with social media, we need, and no one will do this at the top of the pyramid because it'll cost them millions of pounds, to open a Twitter account or an X account, whatever, you should register your bank card. So if you never see comments at the bottom of the Times website, "I'm going to kill this person, I'm going to do this, that and the other," because they've got their bank details, they've got the addresses, they know who they are. That's sadly the only way it's ever going to be combated, but it needs the people at the top to acknowledge that and do it, and it's going to cost them a few million quid to subtract from the many hundreds of millions and billions they've already got.
All right, I'm told we've set a record for longest talking points
dear,
ever. We've got one more for you as well. This pertains to Huntingdon's fixture tomorrow, where there are seven races. He's still chuntering on. Where there are 7 races, 6 of those 7 races have 7 runners or fewer, and the reason for that is that the field size limits are set to 6 or 7 in those races because the stables are being renovated and there are only 51 stables available. 1 or 2 trainers, notably Christian Leach on X, have complained about this. John Berry is another trainer who's had his say on this. It does seem a bit weird, this, doesn't it, Rafe? I'm all behind Huntingdon's redevelopment and getting the stables sorted out and so on and so forth. But if you have no scope to run races up to the 8 runners and beyond, presumably massively curtailing your media rights payments, why wouldn't you just transfer the fixtures to one of the other racecourses in the group? That I can't quite work out.
I don't know what Huntington's summer fixtures programme is, but why are you redeveloping the stables during the core part of the season anyway? Why haven't you done it in the closed part of the season? That would be my first question. And secondly, yes, why can't you transfer to somewhere else? It seems bizarre to me.
I mean, we're not in a position of strength on this at the moment, and
no,
it seems an oddity, doesn't it?
It does. I did a racecourse shift at Huntingdon earlier this month, and we averaged 6 runners a race because of the fast ground that day, and the declarations were pretty thin on the ground. And obviously now that the rains appear to have come in the south, and you would think that those numbers would go up, and not so, because they can't accommodate a large enough number of runners. It seems very strange to say that the most obvious thing would have been to transfer that to another fixture within the group. I'm just counting down to 10 so that we don't go over.
You don't need to. Honestly, that's fine. Those were this week's talking points.
Watch live racing now on racingtv.com.